Captain Elena Rodriguez had always loved the view from the observation deck of New Eden's orbital defense station. From here, she could see the entire colony spread across the valley below, the agricultural domes glinting in the morning light of their new sun, the residential sectors where families were just waking up, the central plaza where children would soon be playing. 8 years of backbreaking work had transformed this alien world into humanity's first true home among the stars. She sipped her coffee, earth-grown beans that had been worth their weight in platinum to ship out here, and allowed herself a moment of pride. 100,000 souls called New Eden home, her home, their home. The sensor alarm shattered the morning calm. Elena's coffee mug hit the deck, forgotten as she sprinted to the command console. Her hands flew across the holographic display, her heart already hammering against her ribs. Multiple contacts, big ones, emerging from FTL at the system's edge. "Defensive stations, this is command," she said, her voice steady despite the ice forming in her gut. "We have unknown vessels entering the system. All personnel to alert status. Communications, hail them on all frequencies." Junior Lieutenant James Park's fingers danced across his console. "Broadcasting standard greeting in 43 languages, Captain. No response." Elena watched the contacts resolve on her screen. 17 ships. No, 20. No, more emerging every second. Her mouth went dry. These weren't explorers. These weren't traders. The formation, the approach vector, the sheer number of vessels, this was a military fleet. "Keep broadcasting," she ordered, "and get me a connection to Governor Williams on the surface. Everyone needs to start evacuation procedures. Now." The ships were close enough now for the sensors to identify their configuration. Elena's stomach dropped as the database returned a match. Tal'kresh Hegemony. One of the galaxy's major powers, a species known for their aggressive territorial expansion and their utter contempt for what they called weak species. "Still no response to our hails, Captain," Park reported, and Elena could hear the tremor in his voice. "They're not even acknowledging our broadcasts." "Captain Rodriguez." The voice came from her personal comm. Governor Williams, his face appearing on her screen, his usual calm replaced by barely controlled panic. "Elena, please tell me those are friends." "I don't know what they are yet, Thomas," Elena replied. "But I need you to begin emergency evacuation. Get people to the shelters, prepare the transport ships. This might be nothing, but..." The Tal'kresh fleet opened fire. There was no warning, no ultimatum, no demand for surrender. The first railgun salvo struck New Eden's communication satellite, vaporizing it in a flash of superheated metal. The second volley targeted the orbital manufacturing platforms. The third hit the defense station's shield generators. "Return fire," Elena screamed, but she already knew it was hopeless. New Eden had defenses appropriate for pirates and raiders, not a full military fleet. Her 4 defense platforms began launching missiles, their point defense lasers tracking incoming projectiles, but it was like throwing pebbles at a tidal wave. On her screen, she watched the Tal'kresh fleet spread into a bombardment formation. Professional, efficient, merciless. "All stations evacuate," she ordered. "Get to the escape pods. That's an order. Park, you two. Move." "Captain, I'm not leaving you. You will follow orders, Lieutenant." Elena's voice cut like a blade. She was already routing every ounce of power to the long-range transmitter. If she was going to die, Earth would know why. Earth would know who. The defense platforms died one by one, brilliant flowers of flame blooming in the void. The Tal'kresh ships moved into high orbit above New Eden, their weapons trained on the colony below. Elena activated the emergency beacon, setting it to broadcast on the quantum relay that would reach Earth in real time. 43 trillion credits of infrastructure for instantaneous communication across light years, and now it would carry nothing but a death scream. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez, New Eden Defense Command," she said, her voice steady, recording every word even as the station shuddered around her from impact after impact. "We are under attack by the Tal'kresh Hegemony. No provocation, no warning. They're in bombardment formation above the colony. I'm uploading all tactical data, all sensor readings. Tell Command, tell Earth, tell everyone. We tried to talk. We tried to." The transmission cut out as a Tal'kresh missile tore through the station's hull. Elena's last thought, as the air rushed out and the cold of space embraced her, was of her daughter back on Earth. Sophia was 7 now. She'd never see her mother again. Never know that Elena's final act had been to make sure humanity would know the truth. New Eden died over the next 4 hours. The Tal'kresh bombardment was systematic, thorough, and utterly without mercy. They targeted the life support centers first, then the hospitals, then the schools. They hunted down transport ships trying to flee the surface, destroying them with casual precision. They burned the agricultural domes, collapsed the residential sectors, and left nothing but scorched earth and cooling corpses. 100,000 human lives, extinguished like candles in a storm. And across the galaxy, on Earth and on every human outpost, the quantum relay carried Elena Rodriguez's final message and the tactical data that followed. Humanity watched in real time as their first colony, their first step toward the stars, was reduced to ashes and silence. The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime was an architectural marvel, a vast amphitheater where representatives from 200 species gathered to debate, negotiate, and theoretically maintain peace across known space. Today, the chamber buzzed with agitated conversation as species argued over the New Eden incident. Ambassador David Okonkwo stood in the human delegation's pod, his dark eyes surveying the chamber with barely contained fury. He was 53 years old, a career diplomat who had spent the last decade establishing humanity's presence in galactic society. He had shaken appendages, pseudopods, and tentacles. He had learned to breathe methane-tainted air at trade conferences and eat protein blocks that tasted like rubber. He had smiled and negotiated and compromised, all to build a place for humanity among the stars. And now he had to stand here and beg for justice for 100,000 murdered civilians. The council speaker, a towering crystalline being from the Kixari Commonwealth, activated the chamber's main hologram. The image of New Eden's destruction played on infinite loop, the bombardment, the fires, the desperate escape attempts. Council recognizes Ambassador Okonkwo of Earth, the speaker said, its translated voice resonating through the chamber. David stepped forward, his hands gripping the podium. Honored representatives, he began, his voice amplified across the vast space. You have seen the evidence. The Tal'kresh Hegemony committed an act of unprovoked genocide against a civilian colony. 100,000 innocent beings, murdered without warning, without cause, without mercy. I stand before you to demand justice. I demand that the Tal'kresh leadership be held accountable. I demand reparations for the families of the victims. I demand. You demand. The interruption came from the Tal'kresh pod, where High Commander Zar'koth stood in his ceremonial armor, his 4 eyes gleaming with contempt. You who have been spacefaring for barely a generation, you dare make demands of the hegemony, the chamber erupted in murmurs. David felt his jaw clench, but he kept his voice level. I demand justice for mass murder. Or is that concept foreign to the hegemony? Zar'koth's mandibles clicked in what passed for a laugh among his species. The territory containing what you called New Eden was claimed by the hegemony 300 years ago. Your colony was built on sovereign Tal'kresh space without permission. We merely defended our territory from trespassers. The system was unclaimed according to Galactic Registry, David shot back. We checked. We filed the proper documentation. We followed every protocol. Old claims supersede new registrations, Zar'koth interrupted. This is established council law. Your ignorance of our ancient territorial markers does not grant you permission to violate our space. David turned to the council speaker. With respect, the Tal'kresh claim was never filed with the Galactic Registry. There were no markers, no warnings, no indication that the system was claimed territory. And even if there had been, even if we had made an honest mistake, that does not justify the murder of 100,000 civilians. At minimum, they could have warned us, could have given us time to evacuate, could have shown even the slightest hint of mercy. Mercy is for the strong to grant the worthy, Zar'koth said. Your species has proven neither strong nor worthy. You are soft, weak. You build homes on worlds you cannot defend, then cry when reality teaches you harsh lessons. Perhaps this tragedy will help you understand your place in the galactic order. The chamber exploded in debate. Some species shouted support for the human position. Others defended the Tal'kresh right to defend their territory. Most simply looked uncomfortable, unwilling to antagonize either side. David watched it all with growing horror. He had been a diplomat long enough to read the room. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Humanity was new, weak, with no powerful allies and nothing significant to offer in trade. The Tal'kresh hegemony controlled 40 star systems, commanded one of the galaxy's largest fleets, and had trade relationships with half the council. When morality conflicted with politics, politics always won. The vote came 3 hours later. The council ruled it a territorial dispute with fault on both sides due to inadequate documentation of historical claims. No sanctions against the Tal'kresh, no reparations, no justice, just sympathy and empty words. David Okonkwo stood before the council one final time. He had written a passionate speech on the flight to Nexus Prime, full of appeals to morality, to shared sentience, to the basic decency that should exist between civilized species. He had crossed out every word during the debate. "Humanity hears the council's judgment," he said, his voice cold and flat. "We understand the message you have sent today. Might makes right. The strong do as they will, the weak suffer as they must. Justice is a fairy tale told to naive species who don't understand how power truly works in this galaxy." He paused, meeting the eyes of every representative he could see. "Thank you for the education. We will not forget it." David turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, he could hear the murmurs beginning, the speculation about what humanity would do. Most expected war, a brief feudal conflict where the Tal'kresh would crush Earth's pitiful fleet and teach humanity an even harsher lesson. They would be disappointed. David Okonkwo knew his species better than that. Humanity didn't start fights it couldn't win. But humanity also never forgot, never forgave, and never, ever stopped planning. Galaxy would learn that soon enough. The recall order went out within hours of the Council's decision. Every human vessel, from military cruisers to civilian trade ships, received the same message: return to Sol system immediately. Every diplomat, every trader, every scientist stationed on alien worlds packed their belongings and headed home. Every embassy closed its doors. Every communication channel shut down. Humanity withdrew from galactic society like a hand pulling back from a flame. The reaction across the galaxy ranged from confusion to concern to contempt. The Kixari Commonwealth sent diplomatic envoys to Earth's outer system, hoping to maintain their trade relationship. The automated defense platforms at the Kuiper Belt sent a single message: humanity is not receiving visitors at this time. The Nexari Federation offered an apology for the Council's decision and proposed a private alliance. Their ships were turned away at the Uit Cloud. The Tal'kresh hegemony celebrated their victory and expanded their territory by 6 more systems over the following year, facing no resistance from the Council. Time passed. 5 years became 10, 10 became 20. The galaxy moved on. New crises emerged. The Kixari and Nexari fought a brief war over mining rights. The Vorthan Collective achieved a breakthrough in FTL technology. A previously unknown species made first contact from the galactic core. Life continued. But humanity remained silent. Junior trade analyst Kixrel of the Nexari Federation had been hatched 2 years after the New Eden incident. To her, humans were barely more than a historical curiosity. A species that had appeared briefly on the galactic stage, suffered a tragedy, and retreated back to their homeworld to sulk. She was reviewing trade manifests when something caught her attention. "Director," she called out to her supervisor, "I'm seeing an unusual pattern in the commodity markets." Director Velthok slithered over to her workstation, his eye stalks focusing on her screen. "Explain." "Over the past 20 years, there have been thousands of purchases of advanced technology by various shell corporations, quantum computing cores, exotic matter synthesizers, genetic sequencing databases, weapon specifications. When I trace the money back," she highlighted the network on her screen, "it all leads to intermediaries who deal with Sol system. Humans." Velthox's stalks quivered with surprise, but they've had no direct contact with the galaxy for 2 decades. Not officially, but they're buying heavily. And look at what they're purchasing. It's not consumer goods or luxuries. It's pure technology, research data, industrial equipment. It's like they're building something. Velthok stared at the data for a long moment. Flag this for intelligence division. They'll want to see it. Kixrel saved the report, but her curiosity lingered. What were the humans doing behind their wall of silence? And why was a species that had withdrawn in apparent defeat still spending enormous resources on advanced technology? The Intelligence Division filed her report with hundreds of others. Low priority, probably nothing. They would later realize that was a mistake. Admiral Thexner of the Kixari Commonwealth Navy had been chasing pirate vessels near the Sol exclusion zone when his sensors detected something impossible. A human ship. Small, probably a scout class, moving through deep space far from any established route. When his cruiser tried to intercept, the human vessel accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible with 20-year-old Earth technology and vanished into FTL. The encounter lasted less than 30 seconds, but Thexner couldn't shake the strangeness of it. The human ship's energy signature had been wrong. More efficient. More powerful. Nothing like the vessels that had left galactic space 2 decades ago. He filed his report with Fleet Command, noting the discrepancy. The response came back quickly. Observe but do not engage any human vessels. The Council had quietly issued a standing order 15 years ago, after the 4th or 5th incident of ships trying to force entry into Sol's system and being destroyed by automated defenses far beyond known human capability. Humanity wanted to be left alone, and they had made very clear that they had the means to enforce that desire. But what were they doing out here, in the darkness between stars? What were they looking for? Thexner would never know. Neither would the dozens of other captains who reported similar encounters over the following years. Human ships, always fleeing, always moving through deep space, their technology advancing at a rate that should have been impossible for an isolated species. In the Tal'kresh Hegemony, High Commander Zar'koth received reports of human vessels near Hegemony space with amused contempt. Let them skulk in the shadows, he told his subordinates. They learned their lesson. They know their place now. Zar'koth had been promoted twice since the New Eden incident, his career flourishing after his successful defense of Hegemony territory. He had personally overseen the destruction of 3 other minor species colonies using the same tactics: overwhelming force, no warning, no mercy. The galaxy's weak either learned to stay away from Tal'kresh space or they learned to die quietly. Humanity, apparently, had chosen the former option. Zar'koth considered them a closed chapter in galactic history, a footnote, a species that had reached for the stars and found them too cold, too hostile, too unforgiving. He was wrong. 47 years after New Eden's destruction, a Vorthan science station detected massive energy fluctuations emanating from the Uit cloud surrounding Sol's system. The readings suggested construction on an enormous scale, megastructures, vast shipyards, weapons testing that registered on sensors multiple light-years away. The Vorthan collective debated sending a delegation to investigate, but memories of destroyed ships and automated defense platforms convinced them otherwise. Whatever humanity was building out there in the cold darkness beyond their homeworld, they clearly didn't want observers. The galaxy had left humanity alone for half a century. The galaxy would continue to leave them alone. That, too, was a mistake. The announcement came without warning, broadcast on all galactic frequencies after 50 years of silence. This is the United Earth Government. We hereby announce the establishment of New Dawn Colony in the Kepler 442 system. The system has been thoroughly vetted against all territorial claims and is certified unclaimed by Galactic Registry. Colony establishment will begin in 30 days. We invite any species with concerns about this action to file formal protests through the Council within that timeframe. The message was professional, bureaucratic, and utterly shocking. Humanity was going back to the stars. In the Galactic Council chambers, the debate raged for hours. Some species welcomed humanity's return. Others worried about what kind of species would emerge after 50 years of isolation. The Tal'kresh delegation remained silent, Zar'koth watching the proceedings with calculating eyes. No formal protests were filed. The Kepler 442 system was indeed unclaimed. Humanity had learned to be meticulous about documentation. The colony ships departed from Earth 30 days later, carrying 10,000 volunteers. This time, there would be no families, no children, only adults who had volunteered with full knowledge of the risks. Most were descendants of New Eden survivors, children who had been safe on Earth when their parents died, now old enough to finish what their families had started. The galaxy watched nervously as humanity planted its flag on a new world. In the Tal'kresh Hegemony Command Center, Zar'koth studied the tactical data on New Dawn with growing satisfaction. The colony was 40 light-years from Earth, in a different direction from the old New Eden site. The defenses were modest, better than New Eden had possessed, but nothing that would stop a determined assault. "They've learned nothing," he said to his second-in-command. "Still soft, still weak, still building homes they cannot defend." "Should we teach them another lesson, Commander?" Zar'koth's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. He had achieved his current position through a combination of military success and political cunning. The destruction of New Eden had proven his strength. Perhaps the destruction of New Dawn would cement his legacy and secure his elevation to Supreme Commander of all Hegemony forces. "Assemble a patrol fleet," he ordered. "Nothing excessive. 15 ships should suffice. We will arrive during their initial landing phase when they are most vulnerable. A quick strike, a clear message. Humanity's place is on Earth, not among the stars." His subordinate hesitated. "Commander, the humans have been silent for 50 years. Should we not exercise caution?" "Perhaps they have prepared." "Prepared what?" Zar'koth interrupted. "They are one species on one world, isolated and alone. Yes, their automated defenses have improved, but building fortress platforms is not the same as projecting military power across light years. No, they are still the same weak prey animals that begged for justice 50 years ago and received none. We will remind them why." The Tal'kresh patrol fleet departed 3 days later. 15 warships, crewed by 5,000 warriors, armed with weapons that could crack planets. They jumped into the Kepler 442 system expecting target practice. Instead, they found a trap. New Dawn's defensive platforms came online the moment the Tal'kresh fleet emerged from FTL. But these were not the simple laser arrays and missile launchers of New Eden. These were weapons that combined technologies from a dozen species, improved and refined by 50 years of human engineering. Railguns with magnetic containment fields that could punch through shields thought impenetrable. Missiles with quantum guidance systems that couldn't be jammed or deceived. Energy weapons that adapted their frequency in real time to match whatever defenses they encountered. The Tal'kresh lost 3 ships in the first 30 seconds. "Retreat," Zar'koth commanded, his confidence shattered. "All ships, emergency jump." The patrol fleet fled, leaving their dead behind, their pride in tatters. Zar'koth stared at his tactical display in stunned silence as they jumped back to Hegemony space. What had just happened? The humans weren't supposed to have weapons like that. They weren't supposed to be capable of. His communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from New Dawn Colony." The hologram flickered to life, showing a human male in military uniform. His face was weathered, his hair gray, his eyes as cold as the void between stars. "High Commander Zar'koth," the human said, his voice calm and measured. "My name is Admiral Marcus Cole, United Earth Defense Force. Your attack on New Dawn has been repelled with minimal human casualties. 3 of your vessels have been destroyed. I am transmitting the names of all Tal'kresh personnel killed in action to your government for notification of their families." Zar'koth's mandibles twitched in rage. "You dare?" "I dare far more than that," Cole interrupted. "You attacked New Eden 50 years ago and killed 100,000 civilians. You believed humanity would accept that atrocity in silence. You were wrong. For 50 years, the galaxy wondered what we were doing behind our defensive perimeter. You assumed we were hiding, accepting our place as a weak species that had learned a harsh lesson. You were wrong about that too." The hologram shifted, showing images of human shipyards in deep space, vast construction facilities, fleets of vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. We were preparing, Cole continued. We were learning, we were building. The Tal'kresh taught us a valuable lesson at New Eden. The galaxy respects only strength. Thank you for the education, Commander. Class is now in session. The transmission ended. Zar'koth stared at the blank hologram for a long moment, his mind racing. Then he activated the fleet-wide emergency channel. All Hegemony forces, mobilize immediately. We are going to war. The Tal'kresh hegemony had not become one of the galaxy's dominant military powers through hesitation. Within hours of Zar'koth's call, warships began converging from across hegemony space. 847 vessels, representing the full military might of a species that had crushed dozens of civilizations over the centuries. The fleet assembled in high orbit above Tal'kresh Prime, the hegemony homeworld. Zar'koth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the overwhelming Fang, watching as the armada came together. This was not a patrol fleet or a raiding party. This was the hammer that would crush humanity's pretensions once and for all. All ships report ready, Commander, his tactical officer announced. Then we will end this farce, Zar'koth declared. Plot a jump to the Kepler 442 system. We will destroy New Dawn, then proceed to Sol and obliterate Earth itself. Humanity will learn that there are prices for defiance that they cannot afford to pay. The fleet jumped as one, tearing through the fabric of spacetime on a mission of extermination. They emerged in the Kepler 442 system ready for battle. Zar'koth's sensors began tracking targets immediately. There, the colony on the surface. There, the defensive platforms. There. The human fleet hung in high orbit above New Dawn like a wall of steel and fire. 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of engineering that combined technologies from across the galaxy with human innovation. They were arranged in a defensive formation, their weapons trained on the Tal'kresh fleet, their hulls bearing a simple designation in letters large enough to read from orbit, UEDS, United Earth Defense Ship. And beneath that, on every single vessel, one word: remember. Commander, his tactical officer's voice was barely a whisper. Those ships, our database has no matches for their design. Their energy signatures are. Commander, they're reading higher than anything in the galaxy. How did they? It doesn't matter how, Zar'koth snarled, though his hearts were hammering in his chest. We outnumber them 4-1. All ships attack formation. Target their flags. Admiral Marcus Cole's voice cut across every Tal'kresh communication channel. The humans had hacked their systems before the battle even began. High Commander Zar'koth, my name is Admiral Marcus Cole. I will give you one opportunity to withdraw, take your fleet, return to Tal'kresh Prime, live. You offer me mercy, Zar'koth's laugh was harsh. We are 800 strong, your 200 ships will be dust, and we are not at Kepler, Cole interrupted. The transmission shifted, showing a new tactical view. Zar'koth felt his blood turn to ice as he recognized the system displayed on his screen. The Tal'kresh system, the hegemony homeworld, and in orbit above it another human fleet, not defensive platforms, not automated systems. A full battle fleet positioned in high orbit above the Tal'kresh homeworld, their weapons trained on the planet below. While you mobilized your forces, we mobilized ours. Cole's voice was quiet, almost gentle. Your homeworld is defenseless, Commander. Your fleet is here. Your government is under our guns. You attacked New Eden 50 years ago without warning, without mercy. You killed 100,000 civilians in 4 hours. We could destroy Tal'kresh Prime in 4 minutes. Every city, every military installation, every life on your planet could end before your fleet could jump back to save them. Zar'koth stared at the tactical display, his mind refusing to accept what he was seeing. You're bluffing. Humans wouldn't. You're right, Cole said. We won't. Because we are not you. The hologram shifted again, showing Cole himself. The Admiral's face was carved from stone, his eyes reflecting a pain that had festered for 50 years. However, your government authorized the murder of 100,000 of my people. Justice will be served. Here are my terms. You will stand down immediately. Your fleet will power down weapons and prepare to be boarded. You and your senior command staff will surrender to stand trial for war crimes. The Tal'kresh government will pay full reparations to the families of every New Eden victim, and your military will submit to a century of monitoring by Earth forces to ensure this never happens again. And if we refuse, Zar'koth's voice was hollow, then we will do to Tal'kresh Prime what you did to New Eden. We will burn your homeworld and leave nothing but ashes. Your species will survive, we will not commit genocide, but your civilization will collapse, your government will fall, and you will spend the next 1,000 years clawing your way back to relevance. The choice is yours, Commander. You have 60 seconds. Zar'koth looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. He thought of his mate and offspring on Tal'kresh Prime. He thought of the 800 million Tal'kresh living on their homeworld, all of them currently under the guns of a species he had dismissed as weak and pathetic. He had taught humanity that the galaxy respected only strength. They had learned that lesson very well indeed. "Stand down," he whispered. Then, louder, "All ships stand down. Power down weapons. Prepare to be boarded." The Battle of Kepler, the engagement that military historians would study for centuries, lasted exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Not a single shot was fired. The Tal'kresh hegemony surrendered without resistance to a species they had tried to exterminate. And across the galaxy, on every communication channel, in every embassy and every fleet command center, beings watched in stunned silence as the balance of power in the galaxy shifted forever. The International War Crimes Tribunal at The Hague had been expanded specifically for this trial. The original building, a monument to humanity's attempts to bring justice to their own worst impulses, was now surrounded by new chambers equipped to handle non-human biology. Tal'kresh required higher gravity and different atmospheric composition, so the defendant's section had been built as a sealed environment. Zar'koth sat in that sealed chamber, shackled by devices that could restrain a being with twice the strength of any human, and watched the proceedings with bitter resignation. 50 Tal'kresh officers sat with him, all members of his command staff who had participated in the New Eden Massacre. They faced human justice now, in a human court, subject to human laws. The irony was not lost on him. Chief Justice Margaret Liu was 83 years old, a small woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much sorrow. She had lost her daughter at New Eden, her granddaughter, her son-in-law. 3 generations of her family, wiped out in 4 hours by the being who now sat before her. But when she looked at Zar'koth, her face showed only professional calm. This tribunal is convened to examine charges of war crimes committed against the civilian population of New Eden Colony on August 15, 2074, she began. The defendants are charged with genocide, crimes against humanity, and violations of the Galactic Convention on the Conduct of Warfare. How do the defendants plead? Zar'koth's translator rendered his clicking mandibles into flat, emotionless English. We acknowledge the facts of the event. We do not acknowledge wrongdoing. We defended Tal'kresh territorial claims against trespassers. This is not a crime under galactic law. This tribunal does not recognize the legitimacy of territorial claims filed after the fact, Justice Liu replied. The Kepler system was unclaimed by all galactic registries at the time of New Eden's establishment. But even if your claim had been legitimate, Commander, that does not justify the tactics you employed. You did not warn the colonists. You did not offer them time to evacuate. You deliberately targeted civilian population centers, medical facilities, and schools. You hunted down fleeing transport ships and destroyed them. These actions constitute war crimes under both human and galactic law. Galactic law, Zar'koth's laugh was bitter. The Galactic Council ruled our actions justified. They said the Galactic Council, Justice Liu interrupted, her voice hardening, made a political decision based on power and expediency. This tribunal makes legal decisions based on evidence and morality. The two are not the same. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Prosecutors presented evidence in excruciating detail. Tactical logs from the Tal'kresh fleet showing the deliberate targeting of civilian centers. Communications intercepts where Tal'kresh officers joked about the hunting. Survivor testimony from other species whose colonies had suffered similar fates at Tal'kresh hands. Elena Rodriguez's final transmission was played in full. The courtroom sat in absolute silence as her voice filled the chamber. Tell them we tried to talk. Tell them, when it ended, Justice Liu took a long moment before speaking. Captain Rodriguez died trying to warn her people. She succeeded. Earth heard her message. Earth remembered. And now, Commander Zar'koth, you face the consequences. The defense argued that the Tal'kresh had acted within the bounds of their culture's understanding of warfare. That imposing human morality on alien species was itself a form of imperialism. That might had always made right in galactic politics, and humanity's sudden military superiority didn't change that fundamental truth. The prosecution's rebuttal was simple. Morality is not relative when it comes to the deliberate murder of innocents. If it were, nothing would be a crime. Everything would be permitted. The defendants chose to commit atrocities. They must face justice for that choice. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. At the sentencing hearing, Zar'koth spoke for the first time since his initial plea. You have won, humans. You have proven yourselves stronger. In the natural order, this gives you the right to destroy us. So do it, execute us. It would be more honest than this performance of justice. Justice Liu looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of 50 years of grief, 50 years of determination, 50 years of remembering. No, Commander. You are sentenced to life imprisonment, not execution. You will live in a cell where you can see the stars you tried to claim through murder. You will live with the knowledge that 800 million of your people were spared by a species you deemed weak and pathetic. You will live knowing that we could have done to your world what you did to ours, but we chose mercy instead. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. We are not executing you because we are strong enough to show mercy even to monsters. That is what separates civilization from barbarism. That is what separates us from you. Remember that, Commander. Remember it every day for the rest of your life. Zar'koth was led away to the prison facility that would hold him until his death. As he left, he looked back at the small human woman who had judged him. You think this makes you righteous, he called out. You think this makes you better than us. Justice Liu's response was quiet, but it carried through the courtroom. No. It just makes us human. 5 years after the trial, the galaxy had adjusted to its new reality. Humanity had not conquered, had not built an empire, had not become the tyrants that Zar'koth had predicted. But they had also not returned to their former weakness. The United Earth Defense Force maintained a fleet that rivaled any 3 species combined. Human warships patrolled trade routes, protecting merchant vessels from pirates. Human aid ships responded to disasters, bringing food and medicine to species in need. Human scientists shared technology freely, accelerating galactic advancement by decades. But humanity also remembered. New Eden had been rebuilt as a memorial world. The names of all 100,000 victims were inscribed on a monument made of materials that would last millennia, visible from orbit. Colonists came, 30,000 now called New Eden home again, but they lived in the shadow of remembrance. Every child who attended school there learned the history. Every adult who worked there knew the price their species had paid to be taken seriously among the stars. New Dawn thrived. 200,000 colonists now, with 3 more colony worlds established in the years since. Humanity was expanding carefully and methodically, always checking claims, always documenting, always prepared, always armed. Admiral Marcus Cole stood in the observation deck of the UEDS Vigilance, his flagship, and watched Earth turn slowly below. He was 68 now, his hair white, his face deeply lined. The last 5 years had aged him more than the previous 50. Command did that to a person. Responsibility did that. Admiral, you have a visitor, his aide announced. Cole turned to see Ambassador David Okonkwo enter the observation deck. The former diplomat was 73 now, retired from active service but still consulted on major policy decisions. He had become a close friend over the years, 2 men bound together by the weight of remembering New Eden. David, Cole greeted him warmly. I didn't know you were coming up to the station. I wanted to see the memorial dedication from orbit, Okonkwo replied, moving to stand beside Cole at the viewport. Seemed fitting. We started this journey together in a way. That day in the council chamber. Below them on Earth's surface, a new monument was being unveiled. Not for New Eden, that memorial stood on the colony world itself. This one was different. This was for the future, a statement of intent carved in stone and metal for all humanity to see. We reach for the stars, we remember the cost, we refuse to be victims. Do you think we've changed? Okonkwo asked quietly. As a species, I mean. 50 years ago, we were explorers, dreamers. Now he gestured at the warships visible through the viewport, dozens of them in various states of construction at the orbital shipyards. Warriors, Cole supplied. Maybe, but not just warriors. We're still explorers, still dreamers. We've just learned to be practical about it. The galaxy fears us now. Some do, others respect us. A few hate us. That's the price of power, David. You taught me that actually with your stories about the Council. Politics is always about power, whether we want it to be or not. Okonkwo nodded slowly. I sometimes wonder if the people we were 50 years ago would recognize what we've become. Cole was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he pulled out a data chip from his pocket. Actually, I wanted to show you something. We found it in New Eden's ruins during the reconstruction. It was in a hardened data core, designed to survive orbital bombardment. Elena Rodriguez's personal logs. He slipped the chip into the observation deck's console. Elena's face appeared on the screen, recorded in the final minutes before the defense station was destroyed. She looked exhausted, terrified, but determined. If anyone finds this, her voice echoed through the observation deck, if Earth survived, don't mourn us. We knew the risks. We chose the stars anyway, but please, please make sure this never happens to anyone else. Be strong enough to protect the innocent. Be wise enough to show mercy. Be human enough to remember that strength without compassion is just tyranny. She paused, looking directly at the camera as if she could see across 50 years and speak directly to them. Don't let them make you into monsters to fight monsters. Stay who we were, stay who we are, stay human. The recording ended. Cole and Okonkwo stood in silence, the words hanging in the air between them. We heard you, Elena, Cole said quietly. We stayed human. But we also made sure we'd never be helpless again. I hope that would be enough for you. Okonkwo placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. I think she'd be proud. We built a fleet, yes, but we also built hospitals. We share our technology. We protect the weak. We showed mercy to our enemies even when they expected death. That's not the behavior of monsters, Marcus. That's the behavior of people who learned from tragedy without being consumed by it. The Tal'kresh disagree. Zar'koth still claims we're hypocrites, pretending to morality while wielding power. Zar'koth is in prison for the rest of his life, facing the consequences of his choices, Okonkwo replied. His opinion of our morality is somewhat suspect. Cole smiled despite himself. Then his expression grew serious again. The Galactic Council wants to revise the warfare conventions. They're calling it the New Eden Protocol. Rules about warning civilian populations, restricting certain weapons, protecting evacuation efforts. Species that violate it will face joint military intervention. Let me guess, they want Earth to lead that intervention force. They do, and I'm recommending we accept. Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. You want humanity to become the galaxy's police force. I want humanity to make sure no other species suffers what New Eden suffered, Cole corrected. Yes, it means responsibility. Yes, it means we'll make enemies, but if we have the power to prevent another massacre and we choose not to use it, then Elena's sacrifice meant nothing. Heavy burden. Someone has to carry it. Cole turned from the viewport, his shoulders straightening. We didn't ask for this role, David. We didn't want it, but the galaxy forced our hand. They taught us that might makes right. Now we're going to teach them that might brings responsibility. Below them, the memorial dedication ceremony concluded. The message was being broadcast across all human colonies, carried on quantum relays to every corner of human space. Earth's president was speaking, her words measured and solemn. We remember New Eden. We remember the 100,000 souls who died reaching for humanity's dreams. We remember the lesson we learned in blood and fire, that the universe is not inherently kind, that peace must be defended, that justice sometimes requires strength. But we also remember who we are. We are human. We reach for the stars not to conquer them, but to walk among them. We build fleets not to oppress, but to protect. We enforce justice not to dominate, but to ensure that no species, human or otherwise, ever suffers as New Eden suffered. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence, observed simultaneously across all human worlds. 100,000 names, spoken aloud by volunteers who had each chosen one victim to remember. It took 14 hours. Every human alive stopped to listen. The first test of Earth's new role came 18 months later. The Varath Confederacy was a minor power, controlling only 3 star systems, but they had developed a new weapons technology that their government believed made them invincible. When the neighboring Qualix Union refused to cede disputed territory, the Varath responded with a devastating orbital strike on the Qualix colony world of Pax 7. 50,000 Qualix died in the bombardment. The Varath government claimed it was a legitimate military target. The images from the surface told a different story: schools, hospitals, residential zones all reduced to rubble. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The debate lasted 3 hours before the Qualix ambassador turned to the human delegation. "We invoke the new Eden Protocol," she said, her crystalline voice breaking with emotion. "We beg Earth's intervention." Ambassador James Park, David Okonkwo's successor, stood slowly. He was 45, young for his position, but he had been born the same year as the New Eden Massacre. He had grown up in the shadow of that tragedy, and it had shaped his entire worldview. "The United Earth government hears the Qualix Union's plea," he said formally. "Under the New Eden Protocol, we recognize that civilian populations have been deliberately targeted in violation of galactic law. Earth will intervene." The Varath delegate shot to his feet. "You have no authority to. We have the authority granted by the New Eden Protocol, which your government ratified 2 years ago," Park interrupted. "We have the authority of moral obligation, and we have the authority of possessing the only fleet in the galaxy capable of stopping you quickly enough to prevent further civilian casualties. The UEDS Vigilance and her battle group are already en route to Varath space. You have 24 hours to surrender your illegal weapons and agree to pay reparations to the Qualix victims. If you refuse, Admiral Cole has orders to disable your entire military fleet. You're declaring war on a sovereign nation." "No," Park's voice was cold. "You declared war when you murdered 50,000 civilians. We're simply ending it." The ultimatum expired without a Varath response. The UEDS Vigilance entered Varath space with 12 other warships and systematically dismantled the Varath military in 6 hours. Not destroyed, disabled. Every Varath warship was left drifting in space, its weapons offline, its engines dead, its crew alive but impotent. Admiral Cole's message to the Varath government was broadcast across the galaxy. "You learned the wrong lesson from New Eden. You thought strength meant you could murder with impunity. You were wrong. Strength means you have a responsibility to protect the innocent. You have failed that responsibility. Now you will face the consequences." The Varath government collapsed within a week. A new administration took power, accepted all terms, and began paying reparations. The Qualix survivors received compensation. The galaxy watched and learned. Humanity was not building an empire, but humanity would not tolerate another New Eden. Over the following years, the pattern repeated. When the Krill Dominion threatened to use biological weapons against a rebellious colony world, Earth intervened. When the Thaxner Confederation began enslaving captured enemy populations, Earth intervened. When the Zar'koth Collective started conducting weapons tests in inhabited systems, Earth intervened. Always the same approach: overwhelming force deployed with surgical precision. Always the same message: protect civilians or face justice. Always the same result: swift military victory followed by enforced peace and reparations. Some species called humanity saviors. Others called them tyrants in disguise. Most simply called them careful. No one wanted to test whether Earth's patience had limits. The Tal'kresh hegemony, diminished but not destroyed, rebuilt slowly under Earth's monitoring. High Commander Zar'koth remained in his cell, but his people learned new ways. A generation of young Tal'kresh grew up with human teachers, learning about the New Eden Protocol, studying the concept of proportional response and civilian protection. It was slow work. Cultural change always was. But it was work that mattered. Admiral Sofia Rodriguez stood in her dress uniform before the New Eden Memorial, her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes tracing the names carved into the monument. She found the one she always looked for. Elena Rodriguez, Captain, New Eden Defense Command, her mother. Killed 50 years before Sophia was born, but still the defining presence in her life. Sophia was 48 now, commanding officer of the UEDS Remembrance, one of humanity's newest warships. She had spent her entire career in the defense force, following in her mother's footsteps, protecting the dream that Elena had died for. Admiral Rodriguez. Sophia turned to see a young Tal'kresh officer approaching nervously. He wore the insignia of the Hegemony's reformed military, now an ally of Earth under the treaty that had ended the war. His name was Kixvath, and he was part of an exchange program where young Tal'kresh officers trained aboard human vessels to learn Earth's approach to military ethics. Cadet Kixvath, Sophia greeted him. I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to see it, he said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into uncertain English. The memorial I wanted to understand. Sophia studied him for a moment. He was young, probably hatched 20 years after the massacre. He bore no responsibility for what his people had done, but he carried the weight of that history nonetheless. What do you think? She asked. Kixvath looked up at the monument, at the 100,000 names that stretched toward the sky. I think I understand why you do what you do, why you intervene when others would not, why you enforce the protocol even when it costs you resources and lives and political capital. Why do we do it? Because you remember, he said simply, because you know what it feels like to be helpless, to watch your people die and receive no justice. You ensure others never feel that pain. Sophia nodded slowly. That's part of it, but there's more. We do it because we learned something important from New Eden's destruction, that power without responsibility is just tyranny. That strength means nothing if it's not used to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That justice deferred is justice denied. She turned back to the memorial, finding her mother's name again. My mother died trying to warn Earth about the attack. Her last words were, "Tell them we tried to talk." She wanted us to know that New Eden didn't die because humans were warlike or aggressive. They died because they tried to be peaceful in a galaxy that didn't value peace, because they trusted in justice from a council that valued power over morality. And now you enforce that morality, Kixvath said. Now we defend it, Sophia corrected. There's a difference. We don't impose our culture on others. We don't demand conformity. We simply insist on one universal rule. You don't murder civilians without consequence. Everything else, trade, territory, governance, culture, that's for species to decide for themselves. But that one rule is non-negotiable. Kixvath was quiet for a long moment. Then, my grandmother died in the war. Not in battle, she was a civilian, caught in a riot when the armistice was announced. Some Tal'kresh couldn't accept that we had surrendered to humans. They lashed out at anyone who supported the treaty. Sophia looked at him with new understanding. I'm sorry. You showed mercy to my people when you could have destroyed us, Kixvath continued. You rebuilt our worlds when you could have left us to collapse. You trained our military when you could have forbidden us from having one. And now you accept me into your ranks when you could have forever labeled all Tal'kresh as enemies. My grandmother died believing humanity would exact vengeance. Instead, you offered us a path to redemption. He met Sophia's eyes, his 4 pupils showing an emotion his species rarely displayed, gratitude. Thank you, Admiral, for remembering the difference between justice and revenge. Sophia felt a tightness in her throat. She looked back at her mother's name one final time, then straightened her shoulders. Come on, Cadet. We have a patrol to run. The galaxy doesn't protect itself. As they walked back to the landing pad, Sophia thought about Elena's final message, recorded in those desperate last minutes. Don't let them make you into monsters to fight monsters. Stay human. They had stayed human. Through 50 years of silence, through the fury of war, through the weight of power and responsibility, they had stayed human. They remembered the victims. They showed mercy to enemies. They built rather than merely destroyed. They had learned the galaxy's harsh lessons. But they had not let those lessons corrupt what made them human. And perhaps, Sophia thought, that was the real victory. Not the military triumph over the Tal'kresh, not the enforcement of the New Eden Protocol, not the respect and fear that Earth commanded across the stars. The real victory was that 100 years after the massacre, humanity could still look at themselves and recognize who they were, could still stand before a memorial to their dead and feel grief rather than only rage, could still teach their former enemies about mercy and justice and responsibility. The galaxy had tried to teach humanity that might makes right. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy that might brings responsibility. That strength without compassion is tyranny. That justice must be defended, even when it costs everything. They had paid for that lesson in blood. 100,000 lives at New Eden, thousands more in the war that followed. Countless resources, endless vigilance, the burden of being the galaxy's conscience when they had never asked for that role. But they had paid it willingly. Because the alternative, a galaxy where the strong devoured the weak without consequence, where justice was a fairy tale told to naive species, that was unacceptable. Sophia boarded her ship and gave the order to depart. The UEDS Remembrance lifted from New Eden's surface, carrying its crew of humans and Tal'kresh and Qualix and Verath and a dozen other species, all working together to patrol the trade routes and protect the innocent. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed. But the core truth remained. They remembered New Eden. They would always remember, and they would never, ever let it happen again. That was the promise carved into the memorial. That was the oath every Defense Force officer swore. That was humanity's gift and burden and responsibility to the galaxy. They reached for the stars. They remembered the cost. They refused to be victims. And in doing so, they had become something the galaxy had desperately needed but never known it lacked. Not conquerors, not tyrants, not saviors. Just people who remembered what it meant to be helpless and refused to let anyone else suffer the same fate. Just humans.